September 15th, 1940. Salisbury Hall, Hertfordshire, England. The morning mist clings to the hedgerows as Geoffrey de Havilland strides across the dew-soaked grass toward the workshop. Inside, the smell of wood shavings and aircraft dope fills the air, a scent more fitting for a furniture factory than an aircraft manufacturer. His design team has gathered around a half-built fuselage frame, and what they're looking at would make any aviation expert shake their head in disbelief. It's made almost entirely of wood. While Supermarine and Hawker are forging fighters from aluminum and steel, de Havilland is betting Britain's survival on plywood, balsa, and Canadian spruce. The Air Ministry has already expressed its skepticism. One official called it de Havilland's folly. Another suggested, with barely concealed disdain, that perhaps the company should stick to training aircraft. But de Havilland sees something they don't. He sees an aircraft so fast it doesn't need defensive armament. So light it can outclimb anything the Luftwaffe can throw at it. So simple it can be built in furniture factories by carpenters and cabinet makers, freeing up precious metal for tanks and ships. The DH.98, soon to be called the Mosquito, is born from desperation and genius in equal measure. "They think we're building the coffin," mutters chief designer Ronald Bishop, running his hand along a beautifully curved wooden rib. "They're wrong. We're building a revolution." The skepticism isn't confined to British officials. Across the Atlantic, American aviation experts follow the project with bemused interest. Wood, in 1940, the United States is gearing up to become the arsenal of democracy, churning out all-metal B-17S, P-38S, and P-47S. The very idea of a wooden combat aircraft seems antiquated, a throwback to the Great War, to the era of canvas and wire. What they don't understand yet is that this ancient material, when engineered with modern precision, possesses qualities that metal cannot match. February 25th, 1941. Hatfield Aerodrome. The Mosquito prototype sits on the runway, its smooth wooden skin gleaming in weak winter sunlight. Test pilot Geoffrey de Havilland, Jr. The designer's son straps himself into the cockpit. No guns, no armor. Just two Rolls-Royce Merlin engines and a crew of two. The engines roar to life with that distinctive Merlin growl, the same engines that power the Spitfire. But mounted in this lightweight wooden airframe, they produce something extraordinary. De Havilland, Jr. releases the brakes. The Mosquito accelerates down the runway with startling urgency, lifting off after barely 800 yards. He pulls back on the stick, and the aircraft climbs at an angle that seems impossible for something carrying two men and two engines. Within minutes, he's reporting speeds that make the ground crew check their instruments twice. 385 miles per hour. Level flight. Nearly 400 in a shallow dive. This wooden aircraft, this carpenter's nightmare, is faster than a Spitfire Memikiv, faster than anything in operational service with the RAF. And unlike every other British bomber, it achieves this speed without defensive guns, without a vulnerable gun turret dragging through the air. The Mosquito's defense is speed itself, but speed is only part of the story. The wooden construction laminated plywood, bonded with high-grade adhesives, creates a structure that's both strong and forgiving. Metal aircraft can shatter from a single cannon shell. The Mosquito's wood absorbs damage, splinters instead of shattering, and often holds together long enough to bring its crew home. There's another advantage that no one predicted: German radar operators, trained to identify aircraft by their metal signatures, sometimes struggle to detect the Mosquito. Its wooden structure reflects radar poorly, making it a partially stealthy aircraft decades before stealth technology becomes a doctrine. July 1941. Bomber Command Headquarters. Air Marshal Arthur Harris studies the Mosquito's test reports with the intensity of a man who has seen too many bombers shot from the sky. His heavy bomber force Sterling's, Halifax's. Wellington's is suffering terrible losses over Germany. On some raids, 10% of his aircraft fail to return. Young men are dying in aluminum coffins, shot down by night fighters and flak before they can reach their targets. The Mosquito offers something different. A bomber that can race to Berlin and back before the Luftwaffe even gets airborne. A reconnaissance aircraft that can photograph German installations from 35,000 feet, beyond the reach of most interceptors. But production is slow. Building wooden aircraft requires skilled craftsmen, specialized jigs, and careful climate control during glue curing. And skepticism still runs deep, especially among American observers. In Washington, U.S. Army Air Force planners are drafting their own bomber doctrine, massive formations of heavily armed B-17S and B-24S, fighting their way through enemy defenses with hundreds of .50 caliber machine guns. The idea of a defenseless wooden bomber strikes them as quaint at best, suicidal at worst. They don't yet understand that you can't shoot what you can't catch. May 31st, 1942. RAF Horsham, St. Faith, Norfolk. Squadron leader George Parry checks his watch 10:47 hours. In 13 minutes, he and his navigator will attempt something that should be impossible, a daylight raid deep into Germany. In broad daylight, without fighter escort. Their target, the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo, Norway. The aircraft idling on the runway is Mosquito B Mach 4, serial number DK-338. Parry has flown Blenheims before lumbering, vulnerable bombers that relied on their defensive guns to survive. Those guns never seem to help much. The Mosquito carries no guns at all in the bomb bay, just 4 500-pound bombs and speed. His navigator, Flying Officer Robbie Cairns, settles into the seat beside him. The Mosquito's two-man crew sits side by side, close enough to communicate without intercom in an emergency. It's intimate, almost conversational. Nothing like the lonely separation of a Lancaster's crew compartments. "Think they'll be expecting us?" Cairns asks. Parry grins. "Not at this speed. They won't." The Merlins roar. The Mosquito leaps forward, unsticks at 110 knots, and climbs away over the North Sea at a rate that would make a hurricane envious. They cruise at just 50 feet above the waves, too low for German radar, too fast for patrol boats to track. The North Sea blurs beneath them, gray and forbidding. At this altitude, at this speed, one moment of inattention means death, but it also means invisibility. They make landfall over Norway right on schedule. Parry pulls back hard on the stick, and the Mosquito claws skyward, trading speed for altitude. By the time German spotters report an aircraft over the coast, DK-338 is already at 1,500 feet and accelerating toward Oslo. The Gestapo headquarters looms ahead, a prominent building in the city center, now serving as the nerve center for Nazi occupation. Parry levels out, steadies the aircraft, and at precisely the right moment, Cairns toggles the bomb release. 4 500-pounders fall away. The Mosquito, suddenly lighter, surges forward. Parry doesn't wait to observe the impact. He's already banking hard, diving back towards sea level, pushing the throttles to maximum emergency power. Behind them, Oslo erupts, The bombs strike the headquarters with devastating precision. But the Mosquito is already 5 miles away, screaming back toward the coast at over 350 miles per hour. German fighters scramble, FW-190S and BF-109S claw for altitude. But by the time they reach operational height, the Mosquito is a distant speck over the North Sea, beyond pursuit, heading home for tea. The raid is surgical, precise, and most remarkably bloodless for the attackers. Not a single Luftwaffe fighter comes close to interception. This is what the Mosquito was built for. August 1942, Washington, D.C. Major Carl Toohey Spots reviews intelligence reports from Britain with mounting skepticism. The British are raving about their wooden bomber, claiming it's revolutionizing precision raids. Though reports seem almost fantastical, 25 Mosquitoes raid a factory in occupied France. All return undamaged. 4 Mosquitoes photograph the entire Ruhr Valley, evading 20 German fighters. Spatz is a pragmatist. He believes in armor, firepower, and formations. The American way, B-17S bristling with guns, flying in combat boxes that create overlapping fields of fire. The notion that you can survive by simply outrunning the enemy strikes him as wishful thinking. Let the British have their wooden toys, he tells his staff. We'll stick with what works. What Spatz doesn't yet grasp is that what works is relative. American bomber formations are already suffering horrific losses on deep penetration raids. Without long-range fighter escort, flying fortresses are proving anything but fortress-like. The Luftwaffe is learning to attack from head-on, targeting the relatively weak nose armament. Young American crews are dying in those aluminum coffins, shot down by fighters that have time to position themselves, aim carefully, and attack from optimal angles. The Mosquito doesn't give them time. December 6, 1942, RAF Marham, Norfolk, Wing Commander Huey Edwards, a Victoria Cross recipient, briefs his crews for an unprecedented mission. They're going to bomb Berlin in daylight, a feat considered impossible since the early days of the war. The aircraft Mosquitoes? Naturally, the plan race in at low level, climb to bombing height just before the target, drop their loads, and be back over the North Sea before the Luftwaffe fully mobilizes. It's audacious. It's borderline insane. And Edwards believes it will work precisely because it seems impossible. The date is chosen deliberately. December 6th is a significant day in the Nazi calendar, a day when Hermann Göring himself is scheduled to give a speech in Berlin. The Mosquito crews have orders to interrupt him at 11:00 hours. 4 Mosquitoes lift off and set course for Germany. They fly the entire route at treetop height, their wooden airframes absorbing the terrain-following stress that would fatigue metal. German radar picks up fleeting contacts, but the operators dismiss them as anomalies or birds. By the time the Mosquitoes reach Berlin, climbing to 20,000 feet for their bomb run, the city's air defenses are completely unprepared. Sirens wail. Flak guns traverse desperately, trying to track these impossibly fast targets. At the Berlin Philharmonic, Göring is mid-sentence when the bombs begin to fall. The Reichsmarschall, who famously boasted that no enemy bomber would ever reach Berlin, is forced to take shelter in his own capital. His speech is abandoned in chaos. The Mosquitoes are already gone, screaming back toward England at maximum speed. BF-109S scramble. But they might as well be chasing lightning. All 4 aircraft return safely. The mission is more than a military success. It's psychological warfare of the highest order. The supposedly impregnable Reich capital has been struck in broad daylight by wooden aircraft that the Nazi propaganda machine had dismissed as primitive. January 30th, 1943. 27,000 feet above northern France. Lieutenant Hans Joachim Jabs of Nachtjagdgeschwader 1 has shot down 28 Allied bombers. He knows every trick, every evasion pattern, every weakness of RAF night raiders. His Bf-110, equipped with upward-firing cannons and the latest Liechtenstein radar, has made him one of the Luftwaffe's most feared night fighter pilots. But today's intercept is different. Ground control has vectored him toward a lone contact racing southeast toward Berlin at 25,000 feet. Jabs advances throttles to maximum power. Climbing hard, his radar operator, Oberfeldwebel Fischer, hunches over the Liechtenstein scope, calling out ranges. Contact holding steady. Speed. Herr Leutnant, this cannot be correct. What's wrong? The contact is showing 570 kilometers per hour. That's faster than us at full power. Jabs frowns. No British bomber can maintain that speed at this altitude. Perhaps it's a malfunction, or the target is in a dive. He pushes his Bf-110 harder. The Daimler-Benz engines screaming at emergency power. Then he sees it a sleek silhouette against the clouds. Twin engines. A shape he's never encountered before. No gun turrets. No defensive positions. Just clean. Elegant lines and that distinctive curved nose. A Mosquito. Jabs lines up for an attack, but even as he does, the distance begins to open. The wooden aircraft is pulling away from him effortlessly, as though his fighter is standing still. He fires a hopeful burst, but the tracers fall uselessly behind the British aircraft. Losing contact, Fischer reports. He's accelerating away. Jabs watches in frustration as the Mosquito disappears into the distance. His Bf-110, while loaded with radar and heavy armament, simply cannot match the British aircraft's performance. He's just experienced what dozens of Luftwaffe pilots are beginning to learn: the Mosquito is untouchable. When he lands, Jabs files a report that his commanders initially refused to believe. A wooden aircraft outrunning Germany's front-line night fighters impossible. Yet the reports keep coming, from pilots across the Reich. The wooden wonder is no longer a joke. It's a nightmare. March 3rd, 1943. Bomber Command Planning Room. High Wycombe. Group Captain Hamish Mahadi spreads reconnaissance photographs across the briefing table. They show the Philips radio valve factory in Eindhoven, Netherlands, a facility producing critical components for German radar and communications equipment. It must be destroyed. But the factory sits in a densely populated Dutch city. Heavy bomber raids would kill thousands of civilians. We need precision, Air Vice Marshal Bennett states flatly. House-to-house precision, and we need it in daylight. The answer, increasingly, is the Mosquito. The plan that emerges is audacious. 93 Mosquitoes and Venturas will attack in a coordinated low-level strike, bombing from rooftop height to ensure accuracy. No civilians are to be harmed if it can be avoided. The Dutch resistance has provided detailed intelligence shift change times, building layouts, even which sections of the factory contain the most critical equipment. Squadron leader Bob Iredale, leading 464 Squadron RAAF, studies the target photographs with his navigator. They'll be going in at 50 feet, pulling up to 500 feet only at the last moment to release their bombs, then diving back to ground level for escape. If we miss, his navigator observes quietly, we'll hit Dutch homes. Then we don't miss. Iredale replies. March 3rd, 1943, 12:30 hours. Eindhoven. Factory workers at the Phillips plant are just beginning their afternoon shift when the air raid sirens wail. It's become routine distant bombers heading for Germany. Nothing to worry about. A few workers glance skyward, then continue toward the factory gates. Then they hear it a sound like rolling thunder, but wrong somehow too low, too fast, too close. The mosquitoes come in below the church steeples, their propellers churning the cold air into visible vortices. They're so low that witnesses later report seeing the pilots' faces. The aircraft scream over residential neighborhoods with their bombs still armed. Engines howling. Iredale's Mosquito rises sharply from 50 feet to 500 steadies for 3 seconds, an eternity, and releases. The bombs arc downward with mathematical precision. He immediately dives back to rooftop height and banks hard, his wingtip nearly scraping a factory chimney. Behind him, the Phillips factory erupts. But it's not the indiscriminate destruction of carpet bombing. It's surgical. Building after building collapses in sequence as mosquitoes place their ordnance with pinpoint accuracy. The adjacent housing remains untouched. The hospital across the street is unscathed. 93 aircraft bomb one of the most important factories in occupied Europe, destroy it completely, and kill only 148 people tragic, but a fraction of what a conventional heavy bomber raid would have caused. Most crucially, the factory workers themselves survive because the Dutch resistance timed the raid for shift change. When the buildings were nearly empty, German fighters scramble from 3 airfields. They find nothing but empty sky. The mosquitoes are already crossing the Dutch coast. Their mission accomplished in minutes. The Eindhoven raid becomes a template. This is precision bombing before the term truly exists. Surgical strikes that later generations will attempt with laser-guided weapons. Achieved here with nothing more than wood, skill, and speed. April 1943. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. American aviation engineers are finally getting their hands on a Mosquito. The British have sent one across the Atlantic for evaluation. And the U.S. Army Air Force technicians approach it with barely concealed skepticism. Colonel Marcus Cooper runs his hand along the wooden fuselage. "It's literally plywood," he mutters to his chief engineer. "Furniture-grade plywood." They tear it apart systematically, measuring, weighing, testing. What they discover forces them to recalibrate their assumptions about aircraft construction. The wood is not simple plywood. It's a sophisticated sandwich of birch plywood, balsa core, and more birch plywood, bonded with high-grade casing glue under precisely controlled temperature and pressure. The result is a structure with an exceptional strength-to-weight ratio in some ways superior to aluminum. The curved wooden formers creating the fuselage shape are works of craftsmanship that would make a master violin maker proud. Every joint, every bond, every structural element represents hours of skilled labor. When they finally test fly it, the American pilots return with grudging respect. September 1943. RAF Sculthorpe, Norfolk. Flight Lieutenant Tony Wickham has flown 47 operational sorties in Mosquitoes, and he's developed an intimate understanding of what the aircraft can and cannot do. Tonight, he's about to push those boundaries further than ever before. The target, Berlin. Again. But this time, it's not about bombing Göring's speeches. It's about something far more audacious: nuisance raids designed to disrupt German sleep, fracture morale, and force the Luftwaffe to keep fighters on constant alert. The strategy, pioneered by the newly formed Light Night Striking Force, is simple but devastating: send small numbers of mosquitoes over Berlin every single night. Sometimes 2 aircraft, sometimes 20, always fast, always unpredictable, always impossible to intercept. Wickham and his navigator, Flying Officer James "Jimmy" Connors, climb into DZ 637 at 22:00 hours. They're carrying 4 500-pound bombs and a single 4,000-pound cookie, a massive blast bomb that will shake buildings across entire city blocks. "Think they'll be waiting for us?" Connors asks, running through the navigation plots. "They're always waiting," Wickham replies, firing up the Merlins. "They just can't catch us." The flight to Berlin takes 2 hours and 40 minutes. They cross the North Sea at 200 feet, climb to 28,000 feet over Denmark, and point the nose toward the German capital. Below them, searchlight batteries sweep the sky. Flak bursts create deadly flowers of shrapnel at predicted altitudes. But the Mosquito's speed makes prediction almost impossible. By the time the flak guns calculate a solution, DZ 637 is already a mile past that position. At precisely 0117, Wickham levels out at 30,000 feet above the Tiergarten. Berlin stretches below them, a blackout-darkened sprawl occasionally illuminated by searchlights and burning buildings from earlier raids. Air raid sirens are already wailing. The Germans know Mosquitoes are coming. They just don't know when or where they'll strike. Bomb doors open. Wickham calls, "Steady, steady." Connors watches the timing. Bomb's gone. The cookie and 4 500-pounders tumble into the darkness. Wickham doesn't wait. He's already diving away, trading altitude for speed, pushing the throttles past the red line. The Merlins scream in protest, but they hold together. Behind them, Berlin erupts. The 4,000-pound blast bomb detonates with a sound that can be heard 40 miles away, shattering windows across 3 square blocks. Apartment dwellers who thought they were safe deep inside the Reich are hurled from their beds. This is the genius of the Mosquito campaign. It's not about destroying Berlin. It's about ensuring that no one in Berlin ever gets a full night's sleep. It's about forcing factory workers to stumble to their shifts exhausted. It's about making Nazi officials understand that their vaunted air defenses cannot protect them. Night after night after night, the Mosquitoes come. Sometimes they drop bombs. Sometimes they drop nothing at all, forcing the entire city into shelters for false alarms. The psychological effect is devastating. German night fighter ace Major Heinrich zu Sein-Wittgenstein shoots down 83 Allied bombers during his career, becoming one of the Luftwaffe's most decorated pilots. But even he struggles with Mosquitoes. In his combat reports, frustration bleeds through the technical language. Target too fast for interception. Lost contact at maximum speed. Unable to close range. The Mosquito is rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. November 18, 1943. Amiens Prison, France. The medieval prison at Amiens holds 120 members of the French resistance scheduled for execution by the Gestapo. Some are due to face the firing squad in just days. The Free French Intelligence Network has been pleading with London rescue is impossible, but perhaps the prison walls could be breached, giving the prisoners a chance to escape. It's a desperate request, requiring impossible precision. The prison sits in the middle of a French town. The walls must be breached without killing the prisoners inside. And it must happen before the executions begin. Group Captain Percy Pickard, a veteran Mosquito pilot who flew one of the earliest Oslo raids, volunteers to lead the mission. He knows the odds. To breach those walls, they'll need to bomb from below 100 feet so low that the bomb's blast radius will threaten the attacking aircraft themselves. We'll need to hit specific sections of the wall. Pickard tells his crews during the briefing. He points to intelligence photographs. Here the guards' quarters, and here the eastern wall, miss by 10 feet in the wrong direction. And we kill the people we're trying to save. 19 Mosquitoes will make the attempt, led by Pickard in Mosquito FB6. Serial number HP 925. February 18th, 1944. 12:03 hours. Amiens. The Mosquitoes come in so low that French civilians later describe seeing the pilots' faces, seeing them gesturing to each other. They scream over the frozen fields of northern France in loose formation. Their bomb bay doors already open. Pickard's Mosquito rises to exactly 75 feet, just high enough to release bombs, low enough to avoid giving German gunners time to react. His navigator releases with mechanical precision. The 500-pounders separate cleanly and arc toward the prison walls. The eastern wall explodes outward. Bricks and mortar rain down. But the trajectory is perfect. The blast throws debris away from the cell blocks. A second Mosquito, piloted by Flight Lieutenant Black Smith, puts his bombs into the guards' mess hall. The German officers never reach their weapons. A third Mosquito, flown by squadron leader Ian Daddy Dale, targets the northern wall. His bombs strike true, blowing a gap wide enough to drive a truck through. In the chaos, 258 prisoners pour through the breached walls. Some are cut down by surviving guards, but 182 escape into the French countryside, hidden by resistance networks. The cost Pickard's Mosquito is hit by ground fire on the egress. He and his navigator crash in a field 12 miles from Amiens. Both are killed, but their mission succeeds spectacularly. The Amiens raid becomes legendary, a demonstration that the Mosquito isn't just a bomber or a reconnaissance aircraft. It's a precision instrument of war, capable of missions that no other aircraft can attempt. March 1944, 8th Air Force Headquarters, England. Major General James Doolittle, commanding the 8th Air Force, finally receives his own Mosquito squadron, the 25th Bombardment Group Reconnaissance. American pilots transitioning from B-17S and B-24S approach the wooden aircraft with curiosity. Lieutenant Robert Buzz Miller, a B-17 pilot with 15 missions over Germany, climbs into a Mosquito for his first familiarization flight. He's used to flying with 9 other crewmen in a 4-engine bomber that handles like a bus. The Mosquito feels like a sports car. "Where's the rest of the crew?" he jokes to his British instructor. "You're looking at him." The RAF squadron leader replies from the right seat. "Just you and me, old boy. And speed. Lots of speed." Miller advances the throttles. Merlins respond with instant, brutal power. The Mosquito accelerates down the runway like nothing he's ever flown, rotates at 110 knots, and climbs at an angle that would be impossible in a B-17. At 15,000 feet, the instructor tells Miller to level out and advance to maximum cruise power. Miller glances at the airspeed indicator and does a double take. "Sir, this can't be right. We're showing 360 miles per hour." "That's correct, Lieutenant. But we're not even at full throttle." "No, and we're carrying a full bomb load. Want to see what she can really do." Miller nods, and the instructor pushes the throttles to war emergency power. The Mosquito surges forward, the airspeed needle climbing past 380, past 390, touching 400 miles per hour in level flight. Miller has spent months watching B-17S, struggle to maintain 180 miles per hour in formation, watching them get torn apart by German fighters that could position themselves carefully for killing attacks. The Mosquito is simply too fast for that kind of warfare. When they land, Miller seeks out his squadron commander. "Sir, request permission to transfer permanently to Mosquito operations." He's not the only one. American pilots are beginning to understand what the British learned 3 years earlier. The wooden wonder isn't wonderful. Despite being made of wood, it's wonderful because of it. May 27, 1944. RAF Thorney Island. Wing Commander Bob Bateson leads 21 Mosquitoes on a mission that would have been unthinkable in 1940, a daylight raid on Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen, Denmark. The target sits in the heart of the city, surrounded by civilian buildings, including a school. The mission planning is meticulous. They'll strike from rooftop height, bombing with the same precision demonstrated at Eindhoven and Amiens. Danish resistance has provided exact blueprints, which offices hold prisoner records, where interrogations are conducted, where the Gestapo keeps their files on Danish resistance networks. At 11:15 hours, the Mosquitoes cross the Danish coast at wave-top height. Citizens in the streets hear them before they see them, that distinctive Merlin roar echoing off buildings. Then the aircraft appear, screaming between church spires, their speed rendering them almost impossible to track. Bateson's aircraft rises to 300 feet, steadies, and releases. His bombs strike the Gestapo headquarters with devastating accuracy. The building erupts, interrogation rooms collapsing, files burning, Gestapo officers buried in rubble. But warfare is never clean. One Mosquito, hit by unexpected flak, crashes into a school, the French school in Copenhagen. The building explodes, killing 86 children and 18 adults. The tragedy haunts the surviving crews for the rest of their lives. Yet, the mission's primary objective succeeds. 30 Danish resistance members escape in the chaos, and the Gestapo's intelligence operations in Copenhagen are crippled for months. War is a calculus of horror, and the Mosquito has made that calculus more precise, but no less terrible. July 1944. Farnborough, England. The culmination of Mosquito development arrives in the form of the Mark 16th, a variant powered by 2-stage supercharged Merlin engines that can maintain full power at altitudes exceeding 40,000 feet. At this height, the Mosquito becomes effectively invulnerable. German fighters simply cannot reach it. Test pilot Geoffrey de Havilland Jr., the same pilot who first flew the prototype in 1941, takes the Mark 16 to 44,000 feet and maintains 380 miles per hour. At this altitude, the air is so thin that contrails stream behind the aircraft like white ribbons against the deep blue. The curvature of the earth is visible, and no German fighter can touch him. The Americans are no longer laughing. They're ordering their own Mosquitoes, demanding production licenses, studying every aspect of the design. What began as de Havilland's folly has become one of the most versatile combat aircraft of the war. Mosquitoes serve as bombers, reconnaissance platforms, night fighters, anti-shipping strike aircraft, pathfinders for heavy bomber streams, and even as meteorological survey aircraft. The design's versatility is limited only by imagination. By the end of 1944, the Light Night Striking Force has flown more than 3,000 sorties to Berlin, more than any other Allied unit. Their loss rate is barely 1%, a figure that seems impossible compared to the 5 to 10% losses suffered by heavy bomber formations. April 10, 1945. Over Berlin, squadron leader Robert "Bud" Palmer flies one of the final Mosquito raids of the European War. Below him, Berlin is dying. Soviet artillery pounds the city from the east. American and British forces advance from the west. The 1,000-year Reich has weeks left. But the Mosquitoes still come, still dropping their loads with the same precision that characterized the raids of 1943. There's no longer any pretense of military necessity. This is about ensuring that the Nazi leadership understands, to the very end, that their air defenses failed. Palmer's navigator, Flying Officer Charles Reed, spots something unusual as they turn for home. 4 Messerschmitt Me, 262 jets climbing rapidly from an airfield east of Berlin. These are Germany's last desperate attempt at technical superiority, jet fighters capable of 540 miles per hour. Jets, 11 o'clock high, climbing fast. Reed calls out. Palmer doesn't waste time on maneuvers. He pushes the throttles to maximum emergency power and points the Mosquito's nose toward England. The Me-262S close the distance. Their speed advantage is undeniable. But they've started too far away. The Mosquito's head start, combined with Palmer's immediate reaction, keeps them just out of cannon range. The jets burn through their fuel in minutes at maximum power, while the Mosquito's efficient Merlins can maintain emergency power for extended periods. The jets break off, turning back toward their base before fuel starvation forces them down in Allied territory. Palmer and Reed cross into Allied airspace. Untouched, even Germany's miracle weapons couldn't catch the wooden wonder when it mattered most. May 8, 1945. VE Day. The war in Europe ends with the Mosquito having flown 28,000 operational sorties. The aircraft that American officials once dismissed as a wooden joke has achieved a loss rate lower than any other Allied combat aircraft. It photographed every significant German installation, bombed Berlin more times than any other aircraft type, and pioneered precision strike tactics that would influence military aviation for decades. The final statistics tell the story: 781 Mosquitoes built, used by the RAF, USAAF, Royal Canadian Air Force, Royal Australian Air Force, and a dozen other nations, adapted for roles its designers never imagined. And all of it built from wood from trees felled in Canadian forests, shaped in British workshops, assembled by craftsmen who understood that sometimes the future looks backward. Geoffrey de Havilland stands in his Hatfield office on VE Day, looking at a photograph of the first prototype from 1941. 4 years ago, the Air Ministry called it folly. American experts dismissed it as quaint. Now it's legend. The wooden wonder proved that speed is the ultimate defense, that precision can replace overwhelming force, and that the best answer to technological problems sometimes lies not in exotic materials or revolutionary designs, but in understanding the fundamental principles of flight and exploiting them with elegance. The Americans stopped laughing somewhere around 1943. By 1945, they were asking how soon they would build their own. The answer, ultimately, was that they couldn't, not really. The Mosquito was a product of British craftsmanship, wartime desperation, and one man's vision of what wood could achieve when pushed to its absolute limits. It outran the best fighters. It struck targets with surgical precision, and it brought its crews home when metal aircraft would have failed. In the end, the joke was on everyone who doubted it.